Hello, everybody. I'm gonna give it a couple minutes for everybody to join, and then we're gonna jump in. If you want, you can start by commenting down below where you're joining us from to give it a couple minutes for more people to join. Okay. Awesome. So I guess we can just get started. Alrighty, so my name is Carla. I'm a UX UI career advisor here for Avocademy. And we have Victoria and Radia. I wanted to thank you both for joining us today. And I wanted to get started by first learning a little bit more about y'all, what you used to do before you decided to dive into UX and UI design, and what you're currently doing now. If Victoria, you want to start, and then Radia, you can jump in, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Hi, my name's Victoria. I am a UX UI designer at Kryterion, and I come from a background in social media management and professional dog grooming. So a pretty different background and career pivot for me.
Hey everybody, my name is Radia. I currently work as a product designer at Messari, which is a crypto startup. Prior to that, I worked as an English teacher, so I taught English as a second language abroad, so also made quite a large career pivot.
That's awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing. For those that are watching, if you want to start dropping some questions in the comments, we'd love to go ahead and get those answered for you. I wanted to also ask y'all a little bit about the timeline, like how long it took you to complete our foundations course, and by how long you think it took you to find a job. Like it can be an estimate, it doesn't have to be like exact. But yeah.
Foundations, that was a long time ago. That was a reason. I think that took me around 9 weeks, something around that. I took a couple weeks extra from the original time frame, and don't quote me on it. I believe the time frame has been extended now for new foundations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's now like a maximum of 16 weeks, but you can still finish all the way from like 8 weeks to 16. But yeah.
And for finding a job, that took me, I think it was like 4.5 months. So,
Awesome.
and that was a little after the new year, and things were really crazy, and I was scared I wasn't going to find anything, but it happened.
Happy for you. What about you, Radia? How long did it take you?
Yeah, so it took me about 10 weeks to complete foundations, and then I also was part of Career Jumpstart. So I did a few projects, added those to my portfolio. That took maybe about 2 months. And I was pretty lucky. Within the following month, I was able to get a couple offers and land my first role.
That's awesome. So both of y'all took less than a year to fully transition into UX and UI design. So congrats on that. To explain a little bit more about what Foundations is for those that are watching, Foundations is our educational course where you learn UX and UI design. You receive unlimited mentorship and you get to complete one project and add it to your portfolio website. You get certified and receive a badge once you graduate Foundations. And then you have Career Jumpstart as a step 2 that you get to apply to, where you get to build real world experience with real clients like startups and nonprofits, and you also get help with the job search and everything that entails. Now I have, since we don't have any questions in the comments, I'm just gonna be dropping questions to y'all. So what was the biggest challenge for y'all to transition into UX and UI design?
I'm gonna have to think about that for a minute.
It's okay. What about you, Radia?
I think for me, yeah, so I think that anybody can learn the skills it takes to become a product designer. I think that anybody can refine their knowledge. I think there is something to say for working with different types of people and also learning how to communicate design decisions. And not only that, but learning how to advocate for UX design and UX design processes. That was something that took me a while to get a grasp on because it's not something you can really learn in a course. It's more so experiential.
Yeah, I think I would have to go along with something along those lines as well. When I first began, I was a little timid when I started my job, and I just wanted to like get the feel of everyone. And then once I really like got my feet on the ground and understood how everyone's minds worked and how to advocate for the design process, because I'm constantly talking with devs and they don't see it in the same way. So when you're talking with stakeholders and the clients, you really have to know how to explain it and be confident in your designs, because you're going to be put on the spot and asked, why did you decide to do this? So if you don't know how to explain the why, you can't really guarantee. I mean, there's no guarantee. I've had designs that I've had, shelved for a bit. That's something you have to learn how to not take anything personally. I mean, it's I mean, I can be sensitive, but I've learned to be tougher in this field. I think that's a big thing about being a UX designer, especially in a small design team, because I'm on a team of 2 designers.
I was gonna ask that, like, how big are the teams that y'all are in? Are they small or big? So Victoria, yours is like 2 designers and that's it?
Yeah.
Awesome. And for you, Radia?
Yeah, I work on a team of 5 designers, but we each work within our own product vertical. So during the day-to-day, I'm not specifically working with one designer on the feature that I own, but I do interact with them on a weekly basis.
Yeah, we're
That's
kind of
super
split up on 2 different things.
That's really awesome. That's really cool. And I know that, like, personally, I know that the Web3 world can also be very, like, complex with, like, the projects that y'all do and things like that. Like, typically, they ask people to know how to code. Did they ask you to code, Radia, or no? Like, to know any coding whatsoever?
No, not
That's
at all.
good.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
yep, I'm
Awesome, because
primarily
that's
working in Figma.
we get that question a lot. It's like, as a UX UI designer, like, do you need to know how to code? And we're always like, no, you don't need to. Some companies that don't know what UX and UI design really is will ask for it, but typically there's no coding. So I was just curious about that.
It can certainly be helpful to know coding, but now Figma has like a dev mode. So I think that's going to be really instrumental for a lot of the designers in the future.
Yeah. No, Figma has created so many updates that have been amazing. Awesome. So I have this question down here. So how much of being a designer is collaborative versus working by yourself? Would you say it's a job more for introverts or extroverts or both? What can you all say about that?
I would say it's kind of a mixed bag, because sometimes you'll be collaborating with so many different team members, but you also need to know how to work by yourself as well. And I wouldn't say it's just introverts or extroverts. I think it's kind of good if you can get on a team with like kind of sliced in half of both, because you might have one person who's not always wanting to speak up, and you might get that little nudge like, come on, say something. So I wouldn't say it's just introverts or extroverts. So it's a bit of everything. It's not really exclusive to one personality type, but being collaborative and knowing how to work by yourself, I would say, is very important.
Yeah, definitely. I think design is a highly collaborative process. You're ideally going to work with other designers, product managers, developers, and stakeholders, and everybody is going to have somewhat of a say in what the final product ends up being. But I do think it's important to be able to work independently and sort of provide designs for those stakeholders to assess, provide different options. So I would say it's equal parts collaborative and individual work. And then as for whether it's a career for both or either introverts or extroverts, I think that anybody could be a designer. I don't think being introverted or extroverted really influences one's ability to design. It's more so, maybe it affects the way that you collaborate, but it's really important to have different types of collaborators on a team anyways.
That's awesome. Alrighty, so for this question, they mentioned how they know that the job market is super hot right now. Is transitioning into UX worth it? I really want to apply for Jumpstart, but the job market is holding me back. What do y'all think about that?
I think it's worth it. It certainly changed my life getting into UX, but it's good to keep in mind that it's not going to happen without you putting the work in, and you have to be sure of it. Different people, it really depends. I mean, some people find a job quick, some people it takes longer. It's kind of the luck of the draw sometimes. I hate to say that, but to be honest, I think it's good to join Career Jumpstart. I had a lot of fun. I learned so much from that. And I have teammates that I still talk with. I was texting with one of my teammates today. And I mean, it's good. You build connections and you learn a lot in Jumpstart. So I guess, yeah, I'd say it's good. Just know what you're getting into and be sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I wouldn't say that it's easy, but definitely the payoff is worth it. And I think when it comes to Career Jumpstart, something that sets Avocademy apart from other boot camps is that you have the ability to work on real client projects. And so, yes, the job market is hot right now, but a lot of these applicants don't have real client experience within their portfolio. And having the ability to show that you've worked on real projects does set you apart as an applicant. So that's definitely something to consider.
Thank you both for answering that. So we have another question. I'm excited because now we have a lot of questions. So we have one from Jacqueline. I was interested in finding out what were the key points of success in your projects that led you to success, and how did that affect your process of getting hired?
Without going into too many details, one of my projects, there were some issues with the team, and really learning how to deal with conflict in that project has helped me tremendously in my job today, and learning how to work with different people. I think that's a really big thing. And yeah, I think that was the most instrumental thing that really helped me to be able to explain how do I handle conflict, because that was a question that I was asked in the interview process.
I think also being very clear about your design process is helpful. Having some sort of visual aid to supplement, questions that you might get asked, being able to actually show and give tangible examples really goes a long way. And then also being yourself, I think, goes a long way too, because you also want that culture fit. So yeah, I think a big thing that led to success for me was being able to communicate that process, and then also going back to communicating design decisions, being able to always give a why behind why you do the things you do.
That's awesome. Okay, so Jessica said, can you describe your experience in the interview process? How many did you apply to? What kind of roles did you apply to? And what are some things to be prepared to answer in interviews? Interviews are going to be different for everybody. There's not like a I don't know, like a cheat sheet kind of thing where you can prepare in depth about exactly what you're going to be asked. In my opinion, I think like what Radia was mentioning, like understanding design processes and explaining the why behind what you did, it's going to get you a long way. But if y'all remember a question specific that y'all got during the interview process that you want to talk about, that'd be cool.
I know one question. I can't remember exactly how I answered it. It was from some of the executive team. They asked me, like, how do I measure success? And that is a very specific question. And it kind of is something you would have to customize depending on who you're interviewing with, I believe. Another question that I was asked that really stood out to me was, what is more important, UX or UI? So I kind of went with, like, like the scale of life and death or whatever. Yeah, and it's a balance. You got to have both. You can't have one without the other. Just like the good and the bad, the dark versus the light. So I said they're both equally important. You can't have one without the other. I don't know if
Do you remember? No, that helped a lot. Do you know how many companies you applied to, if you remember, like approximately?
I applied, I want to say 950 jobs.
Wow. That's a
But
lot.
that was
I love that for you.
November last year.
Okay.
And I started my job in March, at the end of March. Wait, yes, end of March.
Oh, that was fast. It was pretty fast after you started applying.
It felt longer, though. It did. It was just like, and I applied to like anything and everything. And I still have kind of in the future companies that I'm totally interested in. But I'm really happy at my company now.
I love that. What about you, Radia? Do you remember a specific question that you got, or like how many companies you applied to?
So I believe for my first role, I applied to about 300 positions, and I got maybe 6 interviews. And then with my next role, I was able to be a little bit pickier and apply for jobs that really spoke to me. I think with that first position, it's a numbers game. It's about making sure that you apply to as many things as possible and then seeing what lands. And then afterwards, you can be a little bit more selective about what sort of field you want to be in. So I think with my second role, I maybe applied to 20 positions. In terms of interview questions, with my first role, this isn't a question per se, but it is something that helped me stand out as a candidate. After the interview, I asked the hiring manager if they had any hesitations for why I might not be a good fit for the role. And so I was able to address that. And the hesitation that he had was that I had less experience than was listed in the job description. So after the interview, I emailed him and I asked if there was any sort of design challenge or assessment that I could complete to showcase my skill level, despite the fact that I didn't have the years of experience on paper. And he did send me an assessment. I was able to complete that, and then I got the job. So I think sometimes going the extra mile and showing that you really care about a role goes a long way.
And that was the first company that you applied to, or the one that you're working for now? Like the first
that was
company.
the first UX role that I held, yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I feel like not a lot of people know that there are some extra steps that you can take to secure that job. They're kind of just like, okay, they said I wasn't a good fit, so I'm going to move on to the next. So I love that drive of like reaching out, being like, hey, I can do this, you know?
I'd also add to that, following up with the hiring manager, anybody that you've interviewed with, saying thank you and checking in periodically, that is really important.
Mhm.
Don't just leave it in the dark and hope to hear something. They do appreciate you reaching out and checking up.
And you never know. It's like what Radia was talking about before as well, as of like the first job, like you might not want to be super specific, but then the second one, you might want to dive deeper into like what industry you want, what specific role you want. So if you leave on a good note with the hiring managers and recruiters, you can always go back if that was like the dream company that you wanted to work for. So yeah, so I love that. Okay, so I have another question. How long would you say it took you to get comfortable, confident in your role? I'm pretty introverted and quiet, so I'm worried about being my first hurdle. I can't read, so.
I would say it definitely took a few months. I think once I started doing presentations, it really helped to build my confidence and really started establishing relationships with the other members of the company. So once I did that, I think that was how I felt more comfortable. Of course, I used to do YouTube, so I've always been okay like speaking in front of people, but I'd say a way to get comfortable, talk in the mirror. Talk to your camera, just like especially if you get a remote job, get used to speaking on video. If you don't, I mean, you might feel awkward. I mean, it's going to feel awkward at first, but I think, I mean, most people can kind of get a sense of who you are, and most people will be cool with that. I mean, if you're more introverted, they kind of, my company did a personality like thing. Like they kind of know what our personality types are like. So
Yeah, with me, I would say it also took a couple of months. I think a big part of being confident in any role, whether that's product design or outside of product design, is sort of faking it until you make it.
yeah.
Not in a egotistical sense, right? You shouldn't pretend that you know a ton of things that you don't. But I think there's something to be said for acting confident, even if you don't feel confident, especially because you landed that role for a reason, right? You have the experience in your portfolio, you have a certain skill set. Sure, you can grow in your skill set. Everybody can grow in their skill set. But I think remembering that and remembering that anything you don't know, you can learn. So that's a big thing that I tell myself. I think, yeah, I fully believe in everyone's ability to learn whatever it is they put their mind to. You just have to put your mind to it. Yeah, and then something else that really helped me was a book called Articulating Design Decisions. I think it's fantastic, and it more so goes into the people aspect of being a designer rather than the technical aspect. So I really recommend that. I found it was really helpful.
You said the name of the book is Articulating Design. I'm sorry. What was it again?
Articulating Design Decisions.
Awesome. Okay. So I'll. Oh, you're gonna put it in the comment? Oh no.
Yeah, I can
I'll
do
do it.
that. I'm just looking up the author. It's by Tom Griever.
Design decisions. So I'm just gonna listen. My brain is not working today, and it hasn't been working this entire week. I'm just.
No worries.
I can't. I think I'm commenting it. Oh, let's move on to the next question, and I'll look it up with the author, and then I'll write it down. So for the next question, what will make my portfolio stand out in the hiring process as someone who does not have a college degree or a design background?
In my opinion, having real world experience helps you stand out. And also being able to tell a story with your designs. So it's one thing to just list out a set of steps and a process and sort of word dump. It's another thing to craft a story of why a problem exists, why it's important to solve that problem, and how you solve that problem effectively. So practicing storytelling, which also kind of goes back to having those visual aids within your portfolio, that's super helpful. Making sure to pick the proper visual aids really can help enhance your portfolio there. But then, yeah, also having that real client experience.
Mm-hmm.
I would say something along the same line is leveraging your real world experience. And like, so I did website design and stuff like that as a social media manager. So I basically expanded upon that. And I don't have a college degree. I will say that. That was one of my big hesitations getting into UX UI. But I do have a lot of working experience running my own business as a professional dog groomer and social media manager. Totally opposite things, kind of just doing a bunch of different things. But really look into what you've done in the past, leverage that and how you're going to present yourself, and don't make it bland. Your portfolio should really also show a little bit of your personality, some of your likes and interests. Just like have some sort of an about page that, you know, says that information about you, some photos, different things that makes you approachable and feels like a real person. But while also keeping that in mind, you should also make sure that you don't do too much on your portfolio to where, because they're going to be judging the design on your portfolio as well. Mm-hmm. So that is a big thing. You don't want to have a ton of moving images all over the place. That's going to make it distracting. You really want to like have it very basic, everything aligned, everything in the right color scheme. So a little bit of both.
I love that you mentioned that, because one time, this was a long time ago, I was looking at this portfolio that somebody sent out, and it was really cool. They built the entire website themselves, but it had, like, I kid you not, an entire galaxy that would pop out, like with planets and everything, like 3D. And I was like, this is really cool, but it's really distracting. I'm not looking at your work, I'm looking at the galaxy. Which it can be cool depending on what kind of roles you're applying to. If you're more into like illustration and things like that, then yeah. But I'm happy you mentioned that, because I've seen those kinds of portfolios before. I have a question specific for you, Victoria. It says, I currently work in social media management. Can you talk more about the transition from social media to UX design? Is there anything specific that you want to highlight? Specific challenge or overlaps that exist between the two?
That is a very specific question. I'm going to think about it for a minute. So I think the biggest overlap for that is really knowing how to sell an idea and present yourself well. I think that's a big part that I took from that in all the years that I did social media management and running my own business. That I think that was one of the biggest things that really helped me going into this, and having that ability to speak up for myself and kind of know what's going on in the world. And I don't know if that specifically answers your question, because I did a lot of things when doing this. So if you, I mean, I don't know if you're specifically talking about like making posts or promoting items or web design. There's a lot of different things, but it's all helped. I hope that answered in some way.
I muted myself. I was like trying to talk. No, I think that answered the question really well. What do you think are some transferable skills, like soft skills, that people can look into if they come from social media management?
Communication. That's like one of the biggest things, communication.
I love that. And that's with anything, communication skills. They're needed everywhere. Okay, so how is your interview process? What did you do to prepare for the interviews? So something I'm going to mention really fast is we do help you prepare for interviews in our Career Jumpstart program. We do lots of mock interviews with you to make sure that you feel comfortable. But how did y'all specifically prepare?
All the mock interviews, asking questions to my teammates that had been interviewing, kind of practicing, coming up with questions they might ask, jotting down questions I've been asked, watching other designers on YouTube and getting advice in that way.
Yeah, and then for me, I also did a lot of mock interviews, also watched YouTube videos. I did some sessions on ADP List with mentors on that platform as well. And then I would record myself answering interview questions and listen back on the recordings, which is painful but helpful because then you hear where you can improve.
That is awesome. Did you like video record it or just like voice record it?
I just voice recorded, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Alrighty, so somebody said 950 applications. I just thought it was funny. Okay, and then for this one, what questions should we be asking in an interview? How transparent are these companies about their company culture and treatment of employees? I think on Google you can find, like, if you're really interested in like knowing more, like if you don't want the mentorship and you don't want to dive into somebody that has more experience with interviews, my biggest recommendation, like what I always did in the past, I would always go on Google and be like, what kind of questions to ask and like how to best answer this. And now ChatGPT helps you a lot with that too. But what about y'all? Like, how did you prep for asking questions and things like that?
I asked about the company culture. I can't remember when I weaseled that in, but I did in every interview that I did with a company. And I would also research the company. I think that's a really good thing to do. If you're gonna, if someone requests an interview, research them. You can find a lot of information on them on Glassdoor. That's something good. You could also like look on LinkedIn, see if there's any posts by employees or something like that. I just like to get the feel for things when, and I kind of, that's kind of how I go about any kind of conversation. I kind of read the room and I go from there. And I think that's an important skill to have in interviewing.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely doing research on the company. I always ask the question that I mentioned previously, which is whether or not whoever's interviewing me has any hesitations when it comes to my candidacy for the role. I think that helps you address any potential questions they have. Also, looking back now that I've interviewed quite a bit, I would want to know about team structure. So, whether or not the designer sits on the product team, whether or not there's a designated design team, if the product works in a specific product vertical, so working on a specific feature, or is there a product suite and each designer is working on a different product? Getting an idea of how you'll be working and who you'll be working with is helpful because at the end of the day, you're interviewing the company as well to see if you're a good fit. It's a two-way street. So I think those things are important. And then when it comes to transparency, I don't really know. I mean, ideally, the company you work for is going to be transparent about company culture, but there might be some that aren't. It's probably not a same situation for all companies.
I think you can also like what Victoria was saying, you can learn a lot about a company's culture by doing research. Like there's so many ways nowadays that you can learn so much about a company. And if you really want to ask about the culture, just ask. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I don't know
Especially
if that's exactly how I worded it, but I asked in some way. I reword a lot, and I also say ask how big the design team is. You really want to learn that. That's a question I ask with everyone, and of course, I should have mentioned that as well. I did ask about hesitations. That's something that you really should ask, and sometimes you'll get some really great feedback for future interviews.
That's awesome. Okay, so diving into a different question, do you interview and work remotely? I'm guessing in terms to like UX research if you interview people.
I'm not sure. I mean, I've interviewed remotely and I work remotely. I'm not sure if that's an answer to the question. They had me fly out to the headquarters once, like right after I started, because they had a big company party. So they flew me out. But that's the only time I met my team in person.
That's really cool though.
Yeah.
Getting the experience to like go and meet, like even if it's just once, go and meet the company and like the people that work there. That's super cool. What about you, Radia?
Yeah, I do work remotely and I have interviewed only remotely. And if we're talking about like interviews with users, I've also only done that remotely. But my company does have a few offsites every year. So one with the whole company and then one with the product team specifically. So I have met my colleagues.
That's awesome. I think that's always important. Like when you work remotely specifically, like you want to feel like you're part of a team. So if they're able to fly you out at least once or have some type of like event that you can go to, like it's always nice to connect with other people. Okay. So Michelle mentioned, I noticed that you hold a product design role. Are the interviews roles different than a UX designer?
Yeah, so my job title is product designer, and I think that often they're interchangeable. Sometimes the expectation is that a product designer has more experience in the end-to-end design process and maybe takes a bit more of a front row seat when it comes to design strategy. But oftentimes the titles are interchangeable.
Awesome. Okay. Since many roles require years of experience, what are your recommendations for obtaining? I can't talk. For obtaining experience between Avocademy graduation and landing your first role?
I would say join design communities. That was something that I did. I found different Discord servers with different designers on there, and they would have free webinars. A personal favorite of mine is Design Buddies. And I attended a lot of different sessions that they had free design sessions on. You like do a little project for like an hour and a half, and you're gaining experience right there. You can have new portfolio projects right there, but I mean, I didn't end up adding any of them to my portfolio. I just use them to learn more. So.
Yeah, I think joining online webinars, there are YouTubers that resonate with you, watching videos, reading about product design. UXL is a really great website to gain some UX experience. They have some short courses on different UX topics. And then ultimately, what really helped me was Career Jumpstart and working in a team to complete products or projects that were real.
By the way, I love UXL. It's so fun.
Yes.
Awesome. So Jordan asked, if we want to work specifically in UX research, is it important that we be trained more broadly in design too? In my opinion, I think it's important to learn everything, like the end-to-end process. Even if you want to specialize later on as a UX researcher, because even though you want to be in a specialized role, you're going to be working with other designers a lot of the times. So it's important that you understand how they need to execute certain tasks, just in case you need to jump in and help, or if anything comes up. But yeah, that's in my personal opinion.
I agree. I love the UX research part of the process. I do some of that with what I'm doing now because we don't have specific UX researchers. There's more roles for UX design, it seems, than UX research positions. And I think what I gathered most from a lot of the job postings, there's more likely to be more requirements on being a UX research specific person. So I guess it really depends. I would say really get completely into UX design and then decide if you want to focus on research, then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a UX researcher, but I've done some UX research, and I think having the opportunity to do research and then use your research insights to then modify a design or make a decision is a really rewarding process. So having experience there is helpful. And then once you gain that experience, you would be able to then have the qualifications to be a UX research specifically. So yeah, I think it's a little bit more challenging to get there right off the bat.
Specialized roles are typically harder to get into from the beginning than it'd be if you just jump in as a UX UI designer, product designer. Not to say that there's not any specialized roles out there or that you couldn't get one of those roles, just saying that it can be a little bit harder. But personally, I would recommend to get trained in everything because that'll open up more doors for you at the end. Than just like specifically training for UX research. Okay, so this one's fun. What does your typical workday entail for you?
Meetings and constantly iterating.
I love that. What about you, Radia?
Also meetings, and then in the startup space, things move really quickly. So some days I might be pulled into a project that somebody else is working on. Other times I'm heads down in work that I've been working on. A lot of my day is spent in Figma. I would like to do more low fidelity work or sketches or not necessarily jumping into Figma right away, but the reality of it, at least within the startup space, is that oftentimes you're designing really quickly and you're creating a lot of different solutions. So yeah, that's pretty much my day. Previously, when I worked for a larger company where the design process went by a little bit slower, there was more of an opportunity for user research. So some of my days would be spent talking to users, analyzing research insights, doing prototype tests. Yeah.
What about you, Victoria? Do you get to like do a lot of sketches and designs? Because you mentioned iterating, or you just jump straight into Figma?
I haven't really been doing much sketching. I do pretty much jump straight into Figma and just I start different designs, run it by different team members, iterate on it again, and then just kind of going along that flow. But we have been doing some testing lately, so that was kind of fun to get back into that again and presenting prototypes and stuff like that. I really do enjoy that as well. I kind of like a mix of the research and design process.
That's awesome. And how would you say that your work-life balance looks like?
It's pretty good. I'm very tired at the end of the day. But I mean, even more so now because I have an almost 17-year-old dog and a kitten that just kind of keeps me busy at the end of the day and in the morning. But it's fun and I enjoy working from home. And you just kind of, I think the best thing to do is to really like time block. I think time blocking is the best thing you can do and make sure you're on top of things. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. I'm still getting the hang of it. I'm finally just now kind of adjusting to everything because it was a lot to adjust to a 9 to 5.
Especially from owning your own business and everything.
Yeah, I was making my own hours before, and now it's like, okay, I gotta wake up. I gotta do this. Okay.
What about you, Radia? What does your work-life balance looks like?
I think my work-life balance is pretty awesome, actually. I really love my job. I think that I have a lot of time in my personal life too. I find that I do work 9 to 5, but I generally don't work that much later than 5. And sometimes I start a little bit later than 9 and then I'll work a little bit past 5. But my company is really flexible. We have unlimited PTO and it's actually honored. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, I think that my manager is really understanding if I have like a doctor's appointment or something and I need to take a couple hours away from my computer. So yeah, I think the work-life balance is really good.
That's awesome. Well, I have one last question for you guys, and that is if you could give any advice to anybody looking to change careers into UX and UI design, what would it be?
I would say do all your research before you jump into this and really get a feel for it. And take the chance. You may even want to learn a little bit on your own before, just to see if you like it before you want to like invest into that change. I had a great time in Avocademy's Foundations and Career Jumpstart program, and I do recommend it. So, yeah, I mean, just get a feel for it for the job and see if it's going to fit you and your life.
That's awesome. What about you, Radia?
Yeah, so I think the piece of advice I would give is to maintain a growth mindset. I think it can be really challenging and intimidating to start learning a new skill. It can be a really big leap of faith to make a career change or try something completely new. But I think if you maintain the mindset that anything you don't know you can learn, you'll be able to go pretty far. So I think mindset is really important.
I like that. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining this grad panel with me today. I know it was a little late, but thank you. It means the world to me and to everybody that watched. I did go ahead and drop a discount code down below for $200 off that applies to the foundations course. And if you have any remaining questions, please email info@avocademy.com. But thank you all so much for joining. Radia, Victoria, thank you once again. I hope you'll have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.